what's going on between my ears. Everyone seems to be so clear, but I'm feeling foggy. My brain feels like jelly. Let's talk about it with Ronnie and Kelly. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. Hey, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And this is the Judgment Seesaw.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Judgment Seesaw. I'm here with another special guest and wonderful person from the fantasy space. It's Kelly Singh over from Trophy Smack and many other sites and blogs and things that you've done over the years. And we'll get into all of that. But before we get into you and mental health, if this is your first time watching every show, I just give a quick rundown of what the Judgment Seesaw actually is. And so real quickly, it comes from economics. It's been applied to the therapy industry to help people understand how to like actively listen and be less judgmental. And it comes down to an actual like a paradigm in the way we understand people where you can't actually judge and understand simultaneously. And so when you're watching this episode, if you want to try it out, it's a really interesting exercise. You can sit here and try to judge Kelly and I and understand us at the same time. And I bet you're going to have a tough time with it. So that's what the Judgment Seesaw is. In the end, it's about understanding. And I want to understand you, Kelly, and learn more about your story and just talk. So how are you doing today? And as we get started, let's do a little rundown on you in relation to like the fantasy sports industry and what you've got going on right now.
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's 8:48 a.m. I'm at the Trophy Smack office in not so sunny California. We're in our June gloom phase. It's heading in there. But it's okay because I'm here with you. What am I doing in the fantasy space? A lot. We've got my work here at Trophy Smack, where I'm VP of marketing, and we're heading into our busy season. We're planning and getting ready for Scott Fishbowl Live. It will be our third.
Yes.
Pretty exciting. And outside of that, I have Women of Fantasy Football. We'll be ramping up for our August Galvanize fundraiser, which puts women in boot camp for sports media. Super important.
That's amazing.
And my regular DFS work will pick up again on PlayerProfiler, as well as oh my gosh, so many things happening.
You still do articles for Club Fantasy too, yeah?
What was that?
You still do articles with Club Fantasy too, right?
Yes. So I do an article or two at the start of the fantasy season for Club Fantasy. And then throughout the year, I do DFS Academy with Club Fantasy. And right now I'm doing Who's Your Caddy for golf season, which golf is my love.
And you're doing all that and you're making time for me. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And for this
Thanks
discussion.
for having me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and more than you and me for the discussion. I mean, the topic's important. It transcends fantasy sports. It's a life thing. And really appreciate you and thankful for you. And also shout out to Women of Fantasy Football. I got trademarked. It looked like yesterday officially, which is super cool. So not that it wasn't legit, but now in the eyes of the law, legit too. So that is very, very fantastic. Super happy for all of you guys. And just in general, talking about, we can dive into like the stresses and management and all that in a second, but you've also been through a lot in your personal life. We'll talk about a little bit of that during the show, but mental health is the theme here. And so what's your story with it? Anything you're willing to share there is fine. And just in general, your experience with mental health.
Yeah, of course. I know that there are so many different types of mental health struggles out there. And I really do count myself grateful that I don't have to deal with some of the struggles that other people do deal with. But I have my own struggle, and that's ADHD. And I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was 30, so 15 years ago. And prior to that, I had been brushed off by mental health clinicians and doctors looking at anxiety and depression, which I am one of the least anxious people on the planet. Like, I'm very go with the flow. And I'm not depressed that I knew, but if somebody's telling me I'm depressed, maybe I'm depressed. So it
Sure,
was a
sure.
cycle of trying different doctors, different medications, until finally somebody heard me and said that there are big differences between women with ADHD and men with ADHD, and
Interesting.
that's why it's often misdiagnosed. So it's really been a struggle. It really, really has.
Well, and like, congrats to you getting the diagnosis and clarity finally. That's all. It's a lot to learn a new thing about yourself that you have to overcome. Also, after you've tried so long to figure out what that thing is, it can be a huge solace to get clarity there. And so, good for you. I think it is. You talked a little bit about like the rigmarole of figuring some of this stuff out, and that's often the case when people start on a mental health related journey. If they do have
Mhm.
something internal that they're trying to work through, it's a bit of a game of whack-a-mole at first, because
Yeah.
all of these things in the end are kind of inexplicable, and things I've learned, like, from my dad, who is a psychology major, among a few other things. He, has taught me when I was growing up that when I was going through my mental health journey from a very young age, and it took people, like, 15, 20 years to figure me out. But saying, like, like, a lot of these things, if you look at the textbook definition of one disorder and another, they overlap
They
so.
do.
And ADHD is pretty valid. It's one of the sort of kind of like anxiety and ADHD both are, I think, the lowest on the totem pole in terms of what a society views as like serious issues.
Yeah.
But ADHD, if I can just throw in a note there,
Yeah.
I also clinically diagnosed, and the way I explain it and pitch it to people is like, listen, I think sometimes, yes, kids are just squirrely and their parents give them too much sugar growing up, and the teachers think they have ADD, and that's different. But if you close your eyes and like your mind is racing and you can't fall asleep, that's something that's happened to all of us at least once in our life. If you can picture that experience, but 24/7, that is
Mhm.
what it's like for people with ADD. Oftentimes,
It
it's
is.
just like there's just nothing shuts off, and it's pretty detrimental if you can't get a grasp on it. And same with anxiety. You and I are very different in that front. I am anxiety ridden and it paralyzes me. But when I'm happy and I'm around people and it can find a sense of value in myself, it goes away. And I become very much like you, just able to flow and do whatever. So, anyway, I talked a lot right there, but I wanted to just throw in a second piece on
No,
ADD and anxiety.
it's
Um,
such a great point. But you also mentioned something that addresses what's really important to me is women with ADHD. When we were children, the majority of us were not bouncing off the walls. I was an athlete, kept active, but what I've learned is that women tend to be more daydreaming,
mm,
project focused, lists. Um, and that is, you're like thinking of the next before. And I think that's common with ADHD in general, but for
mhm.
women and girls, it presents more of doodling and daydreaming and fidgeting more so than just being like all over the place, like young boys
Yeah.
typically
Yeah.
are. So that's another reason why it's very difficult for girls and women to get a diagnosis as well.
I think, and that's an area of mental health that I frankly am mostly ignorant to, because I've been focusing on myself, and my story is not one of being a woman, so I haven't looked at that side of it. But it is. I actually now I'm going to go look into that because I had no idea, and I
Mhm.
fancy myself as someone that knows a decent amount about mental health at this point. I had no idea that like the diagnosis could be that different, but it makes sense because there is a lot different physiologically between a man and a woman, and of course, different disorders, medications, so on and so forth, are tailored for one or the other. So that makes perfect sense. Um, do you want to talk about right now at all what you went through health wise and overcame?
Yeah, sure. My breast cancer, is that what we want to
Yeah,
discuss?
yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was
Yeah,
looking at the notes
yeah.
while I was. Yes,
Yeah,
you're a
sure.
cancer survivor and winner, and I think it's an important story to share.
Yeah, of course. Last year, in January of 2023, I went in for my regular mammogram, and it was actually about 6 months late. And I think it's important to say that because, again, when you're working with not mental health professionals, health professionals, it's important to find people that you're comfortable with. But when you go get a mammogram or any kind of checkup, men or women, you don't often have control over the clinician that you're seeing. So I went in for my exam, and immediately I am chastised for being 6 months behind on my breast exams. So I'm already like, great, thanks. And then I explained that I was having a symptom. It almost felt like an infection, a warm red area on the top of my breast. And I wanted to make sure I had it checked out because it was abnormal.
Sure.
So I had my mammogram, and basically she's like, you should have gotten in here sooner. After I'm done, and we're going to need to do a sonogram. And so an ultrasound.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting there, and they take me in, and she's doing this. They put this gel on you. They run this thing over you. And
I have heard that part of it is really unpleasant for my mom. She's been checked out a few
it's
times
just
for it.
kind of nerve-wracking. You're trying to look at the screen, see what they're seeing, but it's all like a bunch of blobs. And then that woman leaves and comes back, and she goes, I have to do it again.
Oh,
Long story short, I was in my initial mammogram for 4 hours. And at this point, I knew obviously something was wrong. And I spoke to a doctor on the telephone who was reading the scans, which is another very stressful feeling, and went to get a biopsy. So all of that happened. When I went to have my biopsy, they didn't even wait. The clinician just said, I've been doing this for 30 years and you have breast cancer. And I'm like, well, but she's like, you'll be fine. You'll live. This is very treatable. And I'm just kind of shocked because that's not normally how you get your results.
sure. Yeah.
That was March. And in the midst of all this, I'm trying to keep my normal life going. I went to FSGA winter. I shared with a couple of people what I was going through. And then I ended up having an MRI. And the MRI is kind of the last stop in this breast cancer journey where they're just looking to see where they can see all the cancer. And I ended up having 13 cancerous tumors in just my one breast, and the other one was fine, but the recommendation at that point is to have a double mastectomy. So that's what I ended up doing. The good part in all of this is my lymph nodes were not affected. So even though I was chastised for being 6 months behind, it hadn't spread. It hadn't gotten into my lymph nodes, which means I didn't need chemotherapy or I didn't need radiation because everything was still even there was a lot of it, it was very localized.
That's
So that's
really good, but
it was crazy. It was good. It was good. In April of last year, I had a double mastectomy and I had a very unique surgery, which I don't mind sharing.
sure.
Instead of implants, let's just talk about my breasts today. Instead of implants,
Let's pick this up after dark.
Oh my gosh, I really opened a button right there.
Nobody saw anything. Just to cut in, you're crushing it. This is super raw, and thank you for sharing. This is I know that you've talked about this on a few other shows too, so I appreciate you. But what was the surgery?
So instead of implants, it's called a deep flap, DEIP flap, and they take essentially your stomach, a flap from your stomach area, and all of the blood vessels, and they cut it in half and attach one rectangle here and one rectangle here and let it all heal up. And then they go back in and shape everything. So for Scott
Interesting.
Fishbowl, I was telling the gals, like, it was very awkward. You have to use boob tape to like look normal, feel normal. And I was calling them SpongeBob square boobs. I mean, I used humor to just try and get through
course.
all of this.
Of course.
And then in August, I had a little shape up. And while it's not anything like I thought it would look, and I look nothing like I used to look, that's been another mental health struggle for me. And all I can do is say, I am glad to be alive. I'm glad
Yeah.
to not had to have gone through the chemotherapy portion of this, but I will have to be taking medication for the next 10 plus years because of my age, I'm on the younger end, and women are discovering breast cancer reoccurrences, secondary cancers after 10 years. So kind of sucks because, again, mental health, my estrogen is lowered. It causes a lot of issues. It really messes with my ADHD big time. The brain fog it's uncurable, honestly. Like, even with my medication, you're fighting hormones. Now I'm fighting my body's hormones and like the neurons and chemicals in my brain. And it has been wild.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Well, first of all, shout out to you for getting through all of that and having such a happy spirit about it. You talked earlier too about how like through all of that, you joke to like deal with tough things, and yeah, coping mechanisms are super important. I'm the same way. It reminds me of this phrase I coined, but whatever. There's other words to describe this, but I call it Robin Williams syndrome for people that are actually like chronically depressed, but are also, if you get them in a room, they're the funniest and most active and bubbly person in the social scenario. And then when they leave that scenario, what you don't see is like the stuff behind the scenes, just like with Robin Williams. And ultimately there's two ways to cure that. One is a everlasting cure of maintenance and being aware of it. The other is a final solution, which sucks for all of the friends and family around.
Yeah.
And but going through not just cancer, but any sort of major surgery is like super detrimental for people, whether it's just for a short month or two span where their life gets shaken up, or for years at a time. You can have an everlasting change, especially transformative surgeries that leave you feeling different than you did beforehand. And I think if I could just ask, like, for you, what have you been doing over the last 2 years, or what have you found that has helped you, besides like joking around and laughing, helped you keep your spirits up and stay steady through all of this?
Yeah. I found a method online that's, I forget what it's called, but it's basically looking into a mirror and you're looking at the things that you don't like. So yeah, it's great. I had this surgery that essentially removed, a spare tire. And so my abdomen looks flat, but it doesn't look like my own body. And I look at my breasts and that's not my breasts. And I could go have a third surgery to fix the things that I don't like, but I don't want to go under for another 4 hours of surgery. So I practice looking in the mirror and just loving myself and accepting myself for who I am, and calling out the things that other people would love about myself. And it's almost just I don't want to start crying. It's about like,
It's super important to love yourself. It's important to like those active self-care things, and like, positive thinking creates a positive life, all that nonsense, of course, but it's
yeah,
not nonsense, and it's really important when you're going through things.
it's getting to know yourself again. Even though it's the physicality of it all, it's still like, who is that? Like, I'll pass by the mirror even still sometimes, and it's like you do a double take because it's been a year and I still sometimes don't recognize myself.
Yeah.
And I'm crying.
I've cried on 5 of these so far, so don't worry. I don't know why I'm not crying with you right now. I feel I'm not empathetic at all. No.
No, but I mean, and the medications, they cause, like, I feel like my face is rounder, like everything about me is a little bit different than it used to. So yeah, it's tough, but just reinforcing that um, positive reinforcement with yourself is a big help.
Yeah, well, just to let me jump in and help a little bit here for a second. While you were talking about that, I went over and did a little research and was just typing in what you were saying and seeing what came up. And I don't know if this is exactly what you're describing, but it leads like it shows up for people that deal with anorexia a lot is the BDD, body dysmorphia disorder.
Mhm.
But ignoring that, because I don't think that's necessarily you. You actually went through a transformation and now you're learning to adjust to it. Just going to read some of these off because you're doing some of them and they're really powerful and helpful. So, the phenomenon where you look in the mirror and love and accept yourself for who you are is often referred to as self love or self acceptance. These concepts are integral to positive mental health and well being. And here's a few examples of them. So, positive self perception, like viewing oneself positively and appreciating one's qualities, both physical and non physical, which is what you were talking about. You've been practicing
Mhm.
that in the mirror and adjusting the things. Self compassion, treating oneself with kindness, especially in times of failure or hardship. I suck at that. It's like I'm so bad at being nice to myself and like congratulating. I know I did it before we got on the show, but I have to force myself to like vocalize and say, "Good job, Ronnie." Because usually it's like, yeah, that wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I could have worked harder, or things like that. Mindfulness, I think we've all heard the phrase mindfulness, but the concept of mindfulness on a like truly holistic level is life-changing. It transcends cultures and it has different names throughout different areas of the world. But being able to like be present and fully engage with yourself and with your surroundings and not have all the other stuff going on is, in my opinion, as someone with ADHD, mindfulness is like the ultimate
Impossible.
yes, it's like the unattainable goal, but it's something still to work towards and strive
Oh yeah.
towards. Um, and I'm not going to read all these because it's all. Let me find this one. Oh yeah, practices to cultivate self-love and self-acceptance. All right, here's the number one: mirror work. This
Yeah.
involves looking at yourself in the mirror and speaking positive affirmations. Louise Hay, a pioneer of the self-help movement, popularized this technique, encouraging individuals to express love and acceptance to their reflections through their reflection. And then there's 2 more. Gratitude journaling, which is super, super powerful.
Yeah.
If you haven't been doing that, you definitely should.
I
Um,
recommend.
therapy and counseling. Thank you, ChatGPT. We have never heard of that before. And then finally, mindfulness and meditation, like I mentioned. But funnily enough, mirror work is the first one they mentioned. So
Yeah, it's been very helpful to me, and I'm glad you mentioned gratitude journaling. That's also been very helpful to me, even before my breast cancer journey. I had been going through a lot in 2020. I found out my dad was not my biological father,
wow.
and he was my best friend, and he passed away in 2015. And to discover this news was very jarring. And to top that off, my mother didn't want to discuss it and moved across the country, and we no
Oh my
longer
God.
have a relationship. So that's when I started gratitude journaling at the urging of my therapist. My therapist was like, I think you would really get a lot out of this. I think it would help heal a lot of your trauma. And so I did. I could spend like an hour plus telling you about this crazy journey, because losing my mother in this situation actually helped uncover a lot of childhood trauma that I had really stuffed down and buried. And I am happy that I am free of my mother, to be honest.
Mm.
And it's been probably the healthiest thing that I've ever done, was to let that go. And I think that happens in any toxic relationship. It doesn't have to be a parent child, it can be boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, best friend. If somebody is making you feel less than, or causing you to walk on eggshells, or gaslighting, or any of that, it's not you, it's them.
So, hey, this is totally inappropriately random. I lean off the camera sometimes to hit a vape. That's a mental health thing for me. I get my anxiety high and it lowers it down. But I just wanted to let you know that that's why I keep leaning off to the side. And I think, like, speaking of that, like for me, I have coping mechanisms. One of them is to like have a dose of nicotine, which is something I hope to have curbed. I've defeated a lot of pretty awful habits so far through my journey. And by the end of this year, I want to get rid of that one. But you are not giving me anxiety, but you're talking about things that speak so close to home for me that instead of like welling up with tears, I'm having to like peel off the camera and reset each time. Um, my mom just put it in, and part of the reason I teared up for a second there, or started to, was because my mom and you have a lot in common. She's been through a lot. Um, and she just made a comment here that I can testify to. I'm not going to give her story on air or anything, but she's dealt with a lot of mental health struggles. And uh, I have witnessed for her, she's been doing yoga therapy for at least a few months now, maybe about half a year or more. And it's been wild to watch. And I am somebody that for most of my life, I thought yoga was kind of like, whatever, like yoga's cool. You're more flexible now. Neat. Like, no idea that it had such a true like physiological effect on somebody's mental state too. I also just want to shout, I want to like reach across and give you a hug, Kelly, because you've been through so much, and yet you've been around. You still are like handling your job and you're going to work. And I know a lot of times people will use that as a coping strategy to avoid the inner
Yeah.
turmoil. It's like, let me just dive into work. But at the same time, you're working on yourself. You've been practicing strategies for a while now to help you get through these things. Did your knowledge about those strategies come through therapy, or was there someone like at work or in the industry that gave you some insights there?
No, it all came through therapy. I mean, I had my own coping mechanisms that I had just developed over time from childhood. One of them is people pleasing, which I think is a strategy that a lot of people fall back on. It keeps you under the radar. It keeps you out of trouble. So people pleasing had been something that I had been doing unconsciously as a survival mechanism. When it came to organization or getting things done, I relied heavily on post-it notes, scraps of paper, notebooks, littered my life. And I just thought, this is not living. This is no way to live. This is not how people get through their day to day. And that's what prompted me to really push forward on my ADHD, was the note taking. The people pleasing has been a recent journey through the last 4 years. And I guess it's only been like 3.5 years, because we're in 2024. So that to me was such a revelation. It actually caused a lot of friction in my personal relationships because it changed me. I
Mm,
became stronger and more confident. I had opinions. If you didn't like those opinions, that's okay. I created boundaries. A lot of people
mm.
view boundaries as you're being rude or mean, or
Sure.
I don't know, but it actually, boundaries are very healthy. And I wish more people would respect and understand the creation of boundaries.
We have talked about boundaries for so many episodes this entire month. They're like It not just mental health side, but like for managing your relationship
Yeah.
to the fantasy sports media industry and online social media game, you have to exercise boundaries. There's a lot of advice from people about like just using the mute button. And if someone's really, really toxic, just block them. Like it's just social media. It's not the end of the world. You are more important than pleasing everyone on the internet.
Or even Ronnie saying yes to things that you know you can do and you really want to do, and saying no to things. And it's not because you don't want to, it's because you can't. And because you can't doesn't mean you're failing. You just can't. You don't have the time. You don't have the space in your head. You're not an expert in that area, and that's okay. So I've been really practicing trying to say no. I know a lot of people have the year of yes, but I'm like, I need to take the year of no.
Well, yeah, the year of yes is a fun thing, but I don't do that. I think for me, I struggle with the same thing. Like 2 years ago, a great example, had him on the show a few days ago. Dr. Kevin Murray came on,
Oh, I love
and
him.
yeah, he's the absolute best. I'm so blessed to be able to call him a friend. I know you feel the same way. And he invited me to come on to his show, FF Unlimited, and do a little like feature on me and talk about my story and AI and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And that was a few weeks ago. And I tell you what, Kelly, 2 years ago, I would have been like, yep, cool. I'll figure it out. Let's go. Get me on your show. But now I got boundaries up. And I'm like, hey, Kevin, I love you. Yes. The answer is yes. But can we do it in like 2 months? And totally receptive to that. That's all it took. And that little bit of a disappointment with clarity behind it is so much better than committing to something and then you dealing with the fallout of time management, or what used to happen to me a lot. So I'd be like, yeah, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do this. Yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do this. Yes, I'll do that. And then eventually a few of them don't happen. And then I
Yeah.
leave people with an unfulfilled promise, which is so much worse than just saying, I can't right now, maybe
Yeah.
later, or just no, that's not something I'm interested in.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you notice you talked a little bit about your relationships having struggles with that? And I think
Mhm.
when you mentioned that, you kind of alluded to this, but like taking pride in yourself, and I don't like the word pushover, but I think it's a good way to describe sometimes in relationships where someone is more of the pleaser, they'll often end up doing more of like the nuisance work, maybe around the house or going out and doing things in here and there and saying yes to a lot of things despite not having time. Um, I might have butchered that, but I think you know what I'm getting at. Is that true? One of the things that you've noticed, or not so much?
It's for me, it was more where I wasn't as assertive.
Mm,
And I'm very assertive now. And I do, when we talk about mindfulness, I try to be mindful that my assertiveness doesn't come across as bitchiness
yeah,
or rudeness. Or I think rudeness, I really try not to be rude, but assertive. And I think it's okay to be assertive. So being more assertive, giving more opinion on what I would like to do with my time, being proud of my career and pushing forward in my career. It just wasn't super characteristic of me at the time. And so as those things grew and I became stronger and prouder of the person I was becoming, the people around me had to reevaluate on if they still want to be in my life, if they like this person. And I was okay with that. I was happy with who I was becoming, and if that person didn't fit in your life anymore, that's okay. And I think that's where they say people come in your life for a season or a reason or whatever that whole thing is. But it's very true, because I don't need to change myself to fit into somebody else's narrative.
sure, sure.
So, yeah, I think that's what it was. It was almost just a personality type shift.
That makes perfect sense. I think outwardly, like meeting new people and just in general advancing your career, I would imagine that when you, like me, like this is the first time we've had a extended conversation. I think you're super pleasant. I wouldn't call anything you do rude or bitchy, and um, but I have to imagine that other people feel the same way, and that those differences, just to round this thought up, when you change your personality, just to reiterate what Kelly was saying, and when
Mhm.
you go through therapy and work on something in mental health, oftentimes the people that will notice the changes for better or worse are going to be the people that are in your personal
Closest.
life, your friends and family. And like Kelly said, like if you're working on you, I think it's okay to be selfish with that. Like you have
Mhm.
one life to live. You have one day at a time where you can be happy, and you might as well do it for yourself first. And then as quickly as you can, layer everything for everyone else. Be a good person, be outward, be helpful, be a positive impact in your community. But you can't do that to the fullest extent if you're not loving yourself first and you're not putting effort in to make sure that your life is going in the direction you want.
Mhm.
I have a lot of respect for people that are able to like not overwhelm, but inundate their life with aid and outward help and so on and so forth, and seemingly aren't doing anything for themselves. And I've met people like that. One of my dear family friends was a kind of an alternative pastor. She had been all around the world. She lived with monks and stuff. And she just lived for everyone else. And I used to think that's crazy. Like, what about you? And I've learned over
Mhm.
time that if she had her own house in order, she had her own ducks in a row. And because of that, she was living a vacation that helped other people. And it just appeared like she wasn't doing anything for herself, but it became her like icky guy, her truth. And so
Yeah.
I think that's definitely boundaries are important. Loving yourself is important. And like on the plane, like you don't put the air filter on the other person. They tell you, put it on you first, because if you don't have it on, you
Mhm.
can't help anyone else anyway.
Exactly. That's
Uh,
such a great analogy. That's 100% true. And just as you mentioned, this friend or family member that spends their life helping others, when I find that even about myself, when I'm in my best place, that allows me the space to help others. So it's not, while we're being selfish, we're getting to where we need to be. And I hate even to say being selfish because it's not.
it's
It's
not the
very
right word.
normal.
It's like
We're
being
just trying to be
self-respectful.
ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And once we're ourselves, then there's space for others.
Yes, yes. But just going in, not that I don't want to talk about the real stuff, but it's a lot. And so let's go back into the fantasy space for a second and talk like
Sure.
just a couple of mental health and hygiene strategies that you think are helpful for people. And a few of these questions are questions that I've asked everyone that's come on the show. Um, One of them, though, has to do with dealing with like the online toxicity. And I had Ariel on, I had Liz Fox on, and now you. And particularly being a woman in a male dominated field with everything that comes with that online, there's just a whole different level of toxicity
Yeah.
that you guys deal with compared to like my experience. What is your advice for people like navigating the ups and downs of social media and handling the toxicity and like the pressure that can come from being a fantasy football content creator?
Sure. For myself, I've mentioned this before on other podcasts. There's not a lot of times that I will feel overwhelmed or attacked in the comments. Many times, my community comes to my aid. I've also done a very good job of curating my timeline, and that has to do with muting or blocking. I try not to block people in the fantasy space because it can cause issues if there's some sort of group chat or whatever, but I'm not afraid to do it. Muting is big. I hide. I've hidden. I actually had somebody call me out on hiding comments, but there's one thing I discovered about Twitter too is it's starting to learn and does also protect, because I've missed many ads, and it's not just because my timeline's flooded, it's literally not there. So I'll
Yes.
see
Yeah.
like a like or whatever, and I'll click on it and I'll be like, where is this? And I cannot find it. So I think Twitter is also becoming intuitive on what we want to see. So hiding, relying on those curations from Twitter, that's been really big for me. And then it comes with that growth that I've been talking about, that assertive, that confidence. The Harrison Butker thing is a great example.
Mhm.
I reposted Linda's video of Harrison Butker eating grass. And my comment was so vague. It said nothing like about his performance or his speech or anything. I just said, may this man eat grass every time he steps on the field. So super, like, it's just vague. Like, I gave 0 points of anything.
Sure.
And it blew up to wherever. Do you even know who he is? Did you know who he was before this? He's the #1 kicker. And I started to like respond to some of them where I'm like, I never said that he wasn't the best kicker. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand.
I'm pretty sure Kelly Singh knows who Harrison Butker is, guys.
It was just so bizarre. These people coming out of the woodworks and Chiefs fans, because at the time my profile photo had a sliver of the Chiefs logo in the back because it was from Super Bowl Media Week. And so I started sharing like my clips of Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes answering my questions in the press room. And so I would just play along. But some of them were so vile, and the way that they were very vile, like wishing sex work upon my children for their careers. Like really, really vile things. And that's when I start reporting. I'll just report it. I'm over it. You don't belong in my space or any space, frankly, if you are that vile. So that's kind of how I deal with it. Curation is key.
Well, and that's one of the, I know people complain about Twitter a lot these days, but it's really like X is not like my experience on X. I very rarely deal with stuff that I don't want to
Right.
see.
Same.
And I don't even think about it now. It's just automatic for me. I'll scroll through my timeline. I'll see a post from someone that is just not like some random thing about an NBA player's like girlfriend. I'm like, what? I don't have this on my, who is this? And I'll click on it. And typically I'm not following them. And it's just Twitter being weird and like throwing something random to see if I like it. But I'll just go and I don't block them, but I report it to Twitter, not like, hey, this is a vile post, but you can go in and say, don't show me more posts like this.
Yep. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
And your thing is a such happier place. You start to see content that applies to you. So anybody out there, any women, even especially if you're struggling with your timeline, I really highly recommend that you start looking at curating. And if anybody needs any help with how to do it, I'm happy to help you with that as well.
I was just thinking I would love to sit down with you and anyone else that wants to at some point. I might as well announce it here. I'm going to take the next couple weeks off from doing mental health stuff and give myself a breather and get ready to do the AI things. But this show is going to come back in between the month of May in the form of a different show called Group Therapy, where I'm going to get multiple people from the industry on and we'll have little group chats.
Oh, I love that.
And we can, that'll be more focused. Like we'll have a group chat on, for example, curating your timeline to keep your mentals clear. And we can go through a bunch of tips and give people a little guidebook from it. But it's really important. I think you got to manage the one thing that's different about social media than regular life. Like regular life, you can choose whether you want to go to the store or not, right? And you don't like, the store isn't there with you and everyone else. On social media, like the whole world is there in your living room with you, and you have to put up walls and boundaries and curate it so that the algorithms and so forth know what they're doing, or know how to treat you the right way. I feel like I just gave the X's back end too much credit. The algorithms don't know anything other than how to manage the numbers. They're not thinking yet.
It's starting. I am noticing changes.
Yeah. Well, and that's going to be super fun content that I hope next year can tie into the mental health discussion, is like the weirdness that's going on with tech and the like gradual race towards sentience with a lot of this stuff is fascinating, but we don't need to get into all of that right now. We're at 45 minutes, so we can go longer if you want to. We can wrap it up. What's your call?
It's up to you. I'm having a great time. And if everybody wants to talk a little more, we can.
Sure. Let's do just a couple more questions and then definitely wrap it up, just for the sake of the viewers. Let me go back in here. All right. So your role as the VP of marketing at Trophy Smack. Been doing that for a little while now. It's a
Mhm.
great company. How
Yeah.
has your role there influenced your perspective on balancing professional responsibilities and mental health? And how has it affected your like appreciation and relationship to the industry? And I have a follow-up question too.
Yeah, sure. I landed in this position 2.5 years ago through the fantasy community, and so I'm really grateful for that. It was a in tandem with my career already. Matt Walsh, founder of Trophy Smack, also had a freight business and a spa cover business. And my last position was at Leslie's Pool Supplies corporate, where I led all of their digital marketing. And so I left that position and was just freelancing. And I met him at the expo. We started talking. He started vetting people that I know. And he was like, everybody says I need to hire you. So here I am. It's been an amazing experience. And I guess the way that I balance things is they allow me to balance my life.
Mm,
They didn't make me move here. I'm very good at what I do. So as long as I continue to show results, which Trophy Smack has grown, doubled year over year over the last 3 seasons since I've been here, and I would like to take some of the credit for that.
take it.
um, my team has grown. It was just me and one other person that was kind of working somewhat part-time. And now I have a team of 4 people.
Are they
And
back there right now?
yeah,
Hello, everybody.
they're
Hello,
just,
Trophy Smack.
my desk is in the back corner back there, the real messy one with flags and photos and
The best looking one of all of the desks.
Um, but I guess that's because my career allows me to do that. If you're in a career that you don't enjoy, I would recommend stop doing it.
Yeah.
Find something that you enjoy. If it pays less and you can manage that, great. If it pays more and you enjoy it, great. But being able to have a work-life balance has really saved me. I live here half the month. I live in Phoenix half the month. Both of my kids are grown and out of the house, so I don't necessarily have to worry about that. And podcasts, I'm allowed to do podcasting. My presence helps bring awareness to the company as well. So I'm still able to do my podcasting and my writing as well.
That's fantastic. It sounds
Life
like,
balance.
yeah. The I think I would just parlay that into some advice for anyone that's watching that's in the industry, or just in general. I've had a few people on here that are in the middle of job searches, but for the fantasy industry as a whole, my read is that there are very, very few entities in the fantasy space that are not willing to work with their employees on whatever they're going through in their personal life. Doesn't mean that that's
Mhm.
true 100% across the board. And this is kind of harsh, but I would say to anyone that's watching, whether you are a leader or you're a like an employee of, if you're in a environment where the people that run your company aren't willing to work with you on things, especially if you're having mental health challenges and so forth, there's 400 other fantasy football sites you can go to that'll take better care of you. And I think for
Mhm.
people who are working in industry right now in leadership positions, I honestly can't think of a single person that I'm talking to right now, but just in case, if that's not you and you feel like you're not, or you maybe you don't realize it, but you're not being like, you don't have to be a European socialist full level like flexibility, but maybe work a little bit towards them instead of towards like the classic American way that we run businesses. The fantasy industry is different. It's a community. It's more about family than any other field I've worked in. And creating like a healthy work environment and making sure that your employees are healthy and happy seems to be like the industry standard. So
Yeah.
I'll get off the podium there, but that's my opinion on things.
Yeah, it's so true. I think it's a great space. And also, if you're working in another industry, there are ways that you can take what you know and parlay it into a career in sports, whether it's sports adjacent, like I am right now, or directly. their marketing, for instance, is marketing. Those tactics can be applied in different industries, but finding something that you love is only going to amplify your talent.
Yes. I'm just going to ramble for 1 second just to tie this
Yeah.
whole thing up. So I've talked about this on quite a number of these shows, but going further into it, I talked at length about this on Chuck Bass's show when I guested on there a couple months ago. There's a guy, his name is Michael Porter, and he was a Harvard guy. He wrote an article called What is Strategy in 1997, and it talked about economics, business strategy, buying decisions. But ultimately, like if you have a business, your strategy is all that matters. And people don't really understand what strategy is. And he breaks down what true business strategy actually is. And it's now like the seminal work that has defined global economics for like 30 years. And it's actually pretty dense, but fun to read. The beauty of AI is you can go to the page and put it into an AI and say, stupefy this for me, make it shorter. But the core of it really comes down to unique ideas. And I think that ties directly back to what you were saying. So like if you're trying to make a career in this space, you got to do what you love and do content for you that you love first. Because as I was talking with Leo Pasica yesterday about it, if you're just doing what you think people want to read because other people are doing it, that's not a strategy anymore. This industry is super saturated. There's 500 other people doing the same thing. So you have to do it for yourself. And if you figure out like Chris Allen, he did the weather thing. That's how he got his mark in the industry. It was a unique, new approach, but it doesn't even have to be new. So to wrap this ramble up, I keep using this as an example because it's so simple, but like, let's say that you're really, really good at knitting. Go and make a YouTube channel and fantasy content where you knit stuff for your audience and parlay the knitting practice into your fantasy content. And then you have something unique. It ties into what you love. And you obviously don't do fantasy content if you don't love fantasy football, but you thread them together. You create a true, unique output of content that's like unique to you, but also different than everyone else. And you find a competitive purpose and angle for the industry that makes you happy and also makes your audience happy. I don't know if I explained that all okay, but
no, you explained that great. It's that do what you love. And when we talk about sports betting on any of my shows, it's kind of along the same lines of bet what you know. So anything that you're putting money on, you want to feel comfortable doing it. It's very rare that you're going to win money on a complete flyer. You bet what you know, do what you love, and things turn out better.
And love yourself. Show gratitude. Everyone in life goes through ups and downs. Kelly, your story in the last like 7 years for you, definitely a little tougher than like the average Joe, but you have to take lessons from Kelly. She has seeked out help. First of all, like I'm going to do it myself. It's the number one advice that I could give and share from this show is mental health is important. You should work on it. Everyone has something they could work on, but if you have a serious thing that you're working through, you have to start with someone else helping. She also like talking about gratitude. We're almost done with this series, and I love that ties straight back to Nick Whalen on the first episode. We talked at length about showing gratitude and grace, not just to other people, but to yourself. And through gratitude and grace towards yourself and having a like whatever the simple things in life that you know habitually you need to do to stay happy, as long as you're keeping that checklist consistent, for me, it's like a good diet. Sleep, a little bit of exercise, and keeping my apartment clean. If I can do those 4 things, I feel pretty good. If I don't do all 4 of those, I feel pretty bad. But taking all of that and tying it together, like love yourself. Go out. If you're doing content in this space, find the content that you love for you first, and then you will find your audience second. Don't do it the other way around. And in general, if you're going through a hard moment, make sure that you have people in your life and you have a core that you can reach out to and lean on, because people are here to help you. We talked early in the episode about, we should all be a little selfish and make sure that we're focusing on ourselves. But as you said, selfish isn't the right word. Like self-respecting and self-preserving. We have to make sure that our foundation is built so that as we assemble things above it, things don't fall apart. So put the mask on yourself before helping the person next to you is basically what that comes down to. And in general, try to be more like Kelly Singh. That's kind of what it is up to.
I mean, some days maybe, yeah.
This has been fantastic. Do you have any other things you want to add in before we wrap it up?
I'm just really grateful for the people that I've surrounded myself with. And along the lines of curation, I go through and clean up who I'm following every few months. And I may lose a few thousand followers, and that's okay, because the quote that stuck out at me this last week through the whole Harrison Butker debacle was, somebody said to me, "Know your audience." And I said, my audience is me.
Yeah.
And they were like wanting to debate me on this and blah, blah, blah. But I write content, I do podcasts because I enjoy it. And if anybody else happens to also enjoy it and get something from it, then those are my people and that is my audience. So I do know my audience. My audience is me.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Well, I was gonna say that would be my response too. Like, know your audience. I do know my audience. I don't think you're a part of it. See ya.
Yeah.
There's a great story from someone I know. I'm not going to give any more details than this, but they had a very important person that has contributed a ton to their organization show up in their office and complain to them about some of the social progress they've made, especially in including like trans people into their community. And they're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I don't really know that you guys align with my values anymore. And the person I'm thinking of said to them, quote, I agree.
Yeah.
We don't align with your values anymore. Can I help you with anything else? That's, different strokes for different folks. There's 8 billion people on the planet. You can go find your little echo chamber if you need to.
100%.
Well, Kelly, I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you for hopping on and doing this. Tomorrow, Jake Trowbridge is coming on. We're going to talk hopefully a lot about music and mental health. And then closing out with Bob Harris on Friday. And sometime in the next couple weeks after that, I'm going to have someone interview me and do like a little reverse episode. But this has been the Judgment Seesaw episode 29, I think. We're getting up there. And it's been Kelly Singh. Bye, guys.
What's going on between my ears?